Alright, so the NBA season has started off on a crazy note. A lot of trades that I'd never seen coming or we never seen coming. Just as the NBA season has concluded, guys like Bradley Beal and even Kristaps Porzingis got traded out of Washington, and even Chris Paul got traded 2 times in the span of 2 weeks, even though we thought that he was going to get waived, but hey, we were wrong. There are other key guys that got traded this offseason, and so we finna discuss in depth about the moves of the offseason and what that means for the NBA going forward. So without further ado, let's get on with it. But first, A-Man, say man, this is the A-Man Show back at it again for more content. Make sure y'all subscribe. I post NBA and NFL content. Turn on post notifications so that way y'all don't miss a beat. Anyways, stay tuned and let's get it on. So like I said, the NBA offseason started off crazy and there's a tilt in the NBA landscape. First things first, let's talk about the Bradley Beal trade. The Suns traded Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, multiple second round picks, and pick swaps to the Wizards in exchange for star guard Bradley Beal and other role pieces. For the Suns' case, I thought that this trade was just an unnecessary and desperate move altogether. They knew that KD's time was running up, and so they tried all they could to get the pieces together for KD to compete. Well, they did, but in the wrong way. They brought in another guy who needs the ball in his hands to be effective to pair up with 2 other ball-dominant players. And what makes matters worse, Beal is regarded as a below-average defender, and his $250 million contract won't end in the next 4 years. So with acquiring Beal's contract, the Suns currently are the most capped team in basketball right now. They're the team that is paying the most luxury tax, and it's going to last if they don't move Ayton during the offseason. So basically, it's another jumble up, quote-unquote super team, and even if they move Ayton to free up some cap space, it's still not going to be enough to add enough depth on the roster. Even with depth, I still don't trust this trio one bit because the fit is out of place. It's going to be essentially your turn, my turn type of basketball between the trio of Booker, KD, and Beal due to their high usage rates, and mind you, KD and Beal never were the healthiest players throughout the regular season. As y'all can see from the graphic, Beal only played 50 games last season, and the year prior, he only played 40 games. And KD, we all know how injury prone he is. The Suns made a grave mistake with this trade, and all the trades they made through January to now can really cost them in the future, especially how they've given up 4 future first round draft picks to the Nets in exchange for KD. And they only got 2 first round picks this decade, but the Wizards have the right to swap their picks. Oh man, goddamn, the Suns are fucked in the next few years. Which will bring me to the Wizards side of the trade. Looking at the Wizards, before they acquired Jordan Poole, like the Suns, they were so desperate towards moving on Bradley Beal's contract, it resulted them getting a shitty return of a 38-year-old Chris Paul and Landry Shamet along with second rounders. At first, we were laughing at the Wizards for getting this shit in return. But what we got in return in the Kristaps Porzingis trade was actually really solid. In this 3-team deal, the Memphis Grizzlies acquired Marcus Smart, Celtics got Porzingis and a first-round pick of this year's draft and next year, which is top 4 protected, and the Wizards get Tyus Jones, who is the best bench point guard in the league. So like I said, we were laughing at the Wizards from what they got in return until they flipped Chris Paul towards getting Jordan Poole and what they did in the Kristaps Porzingis trade. For Tyus Jones, they might flip him for a first rounder if they have the chance during this offseason or maybe next year's offseason, depending what they will do with Tyus Jones. For the full breakdown of the Wizards and Warriors trade, the Wizards acquired Jordan Poole, a first round pick in the distant future, and a second round pick from the Warriors, and Golden State will acquire Chris Paul from Washington. Days later, after the Beal trade, the Suns finalized the deal by acquiring the rights to swap with Phoenix with first round picks in next year's draft and through 2026 to 2030. So at the end, it does get better with Washington. They get a future franchise cornerstone in Jordan Poole. They drafted a project player in Beal Bali. due to the Beal trade, and they have multiple pick swaps and multiple first rounders. Now let's look at the Warriors side of the deal. Them getting Chris Paul was really shocking to say the least. Pairing up with another point guard in Steph Curry is really odd to have 2 point guards on the same team. I think that the Warriors will use him as a sixth man, a guy who can initiate the offense off the bench and provide mid-range shooting like a Sean Livingston. The best and the toughest thing about this trade is that they moved on from Jordan Poole off of one season of which he did not meet contract expectations. Don't get me wrong, Poole has been extremely inconsistent, both offense and defense. But I don't think it's fair to move on from him after one season, after many seasons of very solid play before last season. But at the same time, it was the right move for the organization because having to pay a young guy $128 million in 4 years, the Warriors will not only keep on paying the luxury tax, but they have to keep the mixture of young and veteran guys on the roster. And based on what we've seen last year, it's better to move on with some of the young guys. And Poole, unfortunately, was one of them. The Warriors moved on from some of the young players on the roster for the betterment of their development and potential, and instead added more older but seasoned veterans guys like Chris Paul so they can extend the championship window for Curry. So that's it for the Warriors. Let's discuss briefly about the Celtics. Celtics got Kristaps Porzingis in next year's first round pick that is top 4 protected. Brad Stevens hit a jackpot in this trade, and they are for sure the biggest winners of this 3-team trade. However, I do have some concerns about this trade regarding the fact that they really don't need another scorer like Kristaps Porzingis, even though he does fit in the Celtics play style. Because last year and the year prior, they were top 5 in offensive rating in both years and made it to 2 consecutive conference finals appearances. 1 year made it to the finals. So currently with the same roster they had in years past, I didn't think that they really need a guy like a Porzingis. And another thing also is that perimeter defense is going to suffer a little bit due to them giving up Marcus Smart. But aside from that, I really don't blame Brad Stevens for this because they didn't give up a whole lot to get Porzingis. So not only your offense going to be insane if the culture improves as well as Joe Mazzulla improves, but you have depth and a future top 4 protected pick on your side, and also Porzingis can provide some rim protection as well as a weak side defender as long as his ass is not involved in pick and rolls because he's going to get toasted there. But still, textbook move by Brad Stevens. Looking at the Grizzlies, they added a former defensive player of the year player in Marcus Smart, and he can add a veteran presence who can instill discipline to this roster, and adding 2 DPOY players in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Smart, they could be the best defense in the league or at least top 3 defensively. And Smart can be the player that can take up the load while Ja is suspended. Now, free agency has recently started and there are big moves that each team made so far, so we finna get into it. Starting off in my hometown in Houston, the Rockets signed Fred VanVleet on a 3-year, $130 million deal, and man, this is an overpay. Even though VanVleet is a proven borderline all-star caliber player, based on last year, the guy does not earn this much money. Now I know he was a part of a team that was a roller coaster in the Raptors last year, but still that doesn't give him a full-on pass for the numbers that he put up. The Rockets pretty much made a desperate move on getting an all-star caliber veteran. Aside from James Harden having interest in going back to Houston, they didn't have that many free agents that were interested in playing for the Rockets. And VanVleet being one of the few borderline all-star guys interested, the Rockets went ahead and gave him a lucrative deal that he did not deserve. And this is not the worst move they made so far because they went ahead and gave Dillon Brooks a 4-year, $80 million deal. A guy who was arguably the worst player throughout the playoffs last year was given this big of a deal. Russell Westbrook was statistically and based on the eye test, more superior in both the regular season and the playoffs than Dillon Brooks, but he got paid 2 years worth $8 million. If that does not tell you that this is one of the worst moves in the offseason, then I don't know what is. All I know is that there is no way that this man deserved this much money. Although he was second team all defense last year, but he is so inefficient offensively as well as a liability on offense in general, and he wasn't that effective defensively during the postseason. The only thing that this guy can provide is perimeter and help defense, but aside from that, the man is a one-dimensional guy. He can't do anything else aside from playing defense, and I don't know what the Rockets were thinking with signing Dillon Brooks on this big of a deal. Despite this move, with this Van Fleet pairing in Houston, along with an exceptional coach in Ime Udoka, and drafting Amen Thompson with the 4th overall pick, I do think that Houston can be a play-in spot going into the upcoming season. Let's move on to the Lakers, where the Lakers made multiple great moves this offseason. First and foremost, they signed Gabe Vincent on a 2-year, $33 million deal. He was instrumental for the Heat's Cinderella run to the finals last year, and as far as play style goes, he's a great off-the-ball guy who can not only cut to the basket, but provide spacing as well as perimeter defense. They also added guys like Cam Reddish to breathe some youth in the roster as well as provide a scoring presence off the bench, and added Jackson Hayes to provide rim protection, most importantly, and also be a lob threat. They also signed Taurean Prince to be another 3-and-D guy, but the most important part is that they re-signed guys like Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves. Even though I don't like them re-signing D'Lo because he was the main reason why the Lakers got swept in the conference finals, and also he was widely inconsistent in the playoffs last season. Although they let Lonnie Walker and Dennis Schroeder walk in free agency, but at least Rob Pelinka added their replacements on the roster. I'm loving what the Lakers are doing in this free agency. They added much needed key guys on the roster to extend the championship window for LeBron and AD instead of pursuing Kyrie. As it stands right now, the Lakers are legit the rest to the Nuggets as far as them being in the Western Conference goes. And speaking of Kyrie, he just signed a 3-year, $126 million deal with Dallas, and it seems that he's staying put with Luka. They still have ways to go with this roster. They drafted a rim-protecting athletic center in Derek Lively Jr., and they brought back Seth Curry on a 2-year deal, so that's a step of a retool, but still need to add more 3-and-D guys in order for the Mavericks to be a legitimate team. Next up has to be the Utah Jazz. The Hawks finally traded John Collins, but they will trade him to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Rudy Gay and a 2nd round pick. Let me tell y'all, the Jazz fucking fleeced on the Hawks because the Hawks should have got a 1st round pick for John Collins. And now for the Jazz, they re-signed Jordan Clarkson, and with the pairing of Collins, Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, along with other high upside young guys, it will be a team that they can contend for a playing spot. The next team I want to discuss are the Brooklyn Nets, as they signed Cam Johnson on a 4-year, $108 million deal. The guy deserves it because he can provide efficient offense and shooting while playing solid defense for the Nets, and also signed Lonnie Walker on a 1-year deal. Solid moves by Brooklyn. One of the more surprising moves this offseason is the Hornets signing Miles Bridges on a year qualifying offer. I'm shocked that the Hornets are going to keep Miles Bridges on the roster after legal troubles. It's crazy how people with talent can get away from shit like this. Next up has to be the Chicago Bulls in extending Nikola Vucevic on a 3-year deal, and I don't know what the Bulls are doing extending this man instead of trading him. He's better off going to a contending team rather than wasting his time with the Bulls. Another reason why the Chicago Bulls are fucking dysfunctional. Incompetent moves every freaking time. And I have nothing against Nikola Vucevic as a player, but giving this man a extension for 3 years, even though it's not worth it, especially how mediocre your roster is, and better off trading him away for assets, is just not a good move. Next up has to be the Cleveland Cavaliers and signing Max Strus on a 4-year, $64 million deal. Strus, like Vincent, was instrumental for the Heat's run to the finals. He was stroking it from deep from 3 during the playoffs, and adding more spacing for the Cavs roster is definitely going to help out Evan Mobley and of course D. Mitch and Garland. The last thing I want to cover to wrap up the video is going back to the Warriors. They signed Draymond Green on a 4-year, $100 million deal. It's a risky move, but he's the heart and soul of this team. They can't really contend without Draymond Green, so the deal makes sense for now. And also, the Grizzlies signing Desmond Bane on a 5-year, $207 million deal, which is a very shocking move given how this man was playing at a relatively all-star level, But $208 million is too much, and because of that, it's going to be pressure on him this upcoming season to prove that he deserves that deal. And that's all I have for y'all today. I want to mention that Damian Lillard has finally requested a trade out of Portland. I will do a video on the trade destinations that make sense for Lillard, so y'all stay tuned for that. And also let me know about other offseason moves I haven't mentioned in this video in the comment section below. And make sure y'all subscribe for more NBA and NFL content in the future. Road to 1,000 subs, turn on post notifications, and that is all. Stay litty. This is the A-Man Show. Sign out.